And I'll talk about what those levels are in a moment. There is no question that vitamin D plays a central role in every single autoimmune disease. What's an autoimmune disease? Well, the most common ones are diseases like multiple sclerosis, but also rheumatoid arthritis and inflammatory bowel disease like Crohn's disease. So if you have any of these, it is really important to optimize your vitamin D levels. And these are one of the conditions like cancer where I think it's criminally negligent malpractice if you have one of these serious diseases that you aren't monitoring your vitamin D levels. So and just to give you an idea of the strong correlation with multiple sclerosis, autoimmune diseases, I'm going to show a graph of multiple sclerosis where you can see on the bottom axis the latitude, which is the degrees away from the equator. So the closer you are to the equator, you can see the lower the incidence of multiple sclerosis, but the further you go away from the equator, the higher the incidence of multiple sclerosis. And this is true for the other diseases, the other autoimmune diseases also. Now, most people aren't aware that vitamin D is actually a potent antibiotic. It increases very specific antimicrobial peptides that can help prevent many infections. The specific protein is cathelicidin, or LL37. That is why vitamin D can be so helpful in the treatment of many acute infections that we see, such as upper respiratory infections like coughs, colds, the flu. And one of the ways that we learn this is by evaluating these flu epidemics that we've had in the past, but also in the treatment of tuberculosis. Many of you may not be aware that over a century ago, that long before we had effective antimicrobials to treat tuberculosis, that sunlight therapy or heliotherapy was one of the primary ways that people with tuberculosis were treated, and they had incredible resolutions. They went to these solariums, and people with tuberculosis got better. So you can actually use vitamin D acutely for infections, and I'm going to talk about that dose later in the video. But you can use it in a relatively large dose for a few days to actually upregulate your immune system to invoke these specific anti-infectious proteins to help your body rid the infection quickly, easily, and inexpensively. Now, interestingly, not many of us want to age, of course. So one of the another important role of vitamin D is actually in limiting and slowing down the aging factor, like in conjunction with many of the other tools that we know work really well for that. Now, vitamin D is profoundly useful in many skin conditions, such as psoriasis and eczema. It's also helpful for insomnia, so you have trouble sleeping, as so many people do, that you're going to want to make sure that your vitamin D levels are normalized. Hearing loss, who would have known, but vitamin D seems to play a major role in hearing loss, as it does in muscle pains and periodontal diseases or cavities or gingival hypoplasia. Now, not a crucial one because it's not really affecting diseases, but it's also interesting that vitamin D is also enhancing athletic performance. But it's been shown to be a major factor in the most common cause of blindness in the developed world, which is age-related macular degeneration. And for those of you who require the use of reading glasses, then that's a problem called myopia, but vitamin D is shown to be very useful in that condition. So not only do we know that it's crucial for pregnant women to have optimized vitamin D levels to limit the risk of autism, but we also know it's helpful to prevent preeclampsia, which is an important complication of pregnancy. But it's crucial to have optimal vitamin D levels even before you're pregnant because it's one of the major factors that contributes to fertility. And vitamin D is also useful for many neurological and mental challenges, such as depression, Alzheimer's, schizophrenia. It's also been useful for migraines and asthma and cystic fibrosis. And one of the most novel approaches, and you've seen about it on my site, and I just wanted to go into some specific details here because it's such an important application, is vitamin D may be the single most important chemotherapy agent ever uncovered. So it's an enormously influential and important part of the treatment for cancer. And I'll go over the specific reasons why I believe that's so in a few minutes. But I believe, like many of these other diseases, any serious chronic degenerative disease, if you have not looked at and monitored and optimized your vitamin D levels, you are missing a major part of the successful resolution of your health challenge. So let's talk about vitamin D and cancer a bit now. But after I finish that, I'm going to go into the important ways that you can actually measure vitamin D and some of the concerns that you might have about getting vitamin D from the sun. So really important information, but I just did want to talk a little about cancer because it's so important. Now we know that vitamin D levels are crucially important in the management of almost every single major cancer category, and that would be breast cancer, prostate cancer in the men, lung cancer, colon cancer, and interestingly, it also reduces, does not increase the risk of melanoma. Now, just to illustrate some of the epidemiology and the correlation of sun exposure and cancer, you can look at this slide and you'll see the areas in the blue. This is the first slide shows the relationship between colon cancer and areas in the U.S. at least. And you'll see the blue areas are higher areas with higher colon cancer incidence, and the areas in the actually lower colon cancer incidence, and areas in the red are areas were higher. So you can see that the further north you go, typically, and the further away you get from the equator, the higher the incidence of colon cancer. And you can see, as we switch to the next slide, that correlation also appears to be present for the breast, prostate, stomach, and kidney cancer. Now, you might be wondering, for those of you who have a scientific bent, how vitamin D works to inhibit cancer. Well, it does so for a number of very well-established, clear mechanisms. It does so by increasing cellular differentiation and a process called apoptosis, or cellular death. So it helps kill those cancer cells more quickly. And on the components where it inhibits things, it actually inhibits cancer cell proliferation. It decreases the ability of the cancer cells to become invasive and increase into a metastatic potential, so it limits their ability to spread to other tissues. It also decreases the angiogenesis, which is the ability of your body, of the cancer cells, to stimulate new blood cell growth to feed its growth. So it decreases that. And it also decreases inflammation generally, which of course is very useful to inhibit the growth of cancer. Now, I believe that we were all designed to optimize our vitamin D levels through exposure of our skin to appropriate amounts of sunshine. Now, I know that may seem like a controversial area to many, and I'm going to go into some of the objections to that philosophy in a moment, but I still want to finish up this information on vitamin D and cancer first. But I believe that's the way that we were designed to do it. I believe it's the optimal way. So I want to review some of the mechanics of how exposing your skin to sun actually results in increased vitamin D levels. So there are many wavelengths that are present in sunlight. For our purposes, the ones that's important to understand are ultraviolet radiation, and that breaks down to there's actually three forms of it, but there's the two primary ones we need to be concerned with are ultraviolet A and ultraviolet B, or UVA and UVB. Now, the UVB is actually what contributes to the formation of vitamin D in your body. The UVA actually increases the risk of cancer, and that's an important component that we'll come back to in a moment. But essentially, what happens is that you need 4 UVB photons to combine with one molecule of cholesterol, actually specifically 7-dehydroxycholesterol, in your skin, and that actually will form what's called vitamin D3, or human vitamin D3. So there is another type of vitamin that's used, and it's a synthetic form. It's vitamin D2, but your body makes vitamin D3.